It is not enough for America's future that some participate and others don't. We have been given an extraordinary blessing, and at this moment in time, our country needs us. And we need people like George Soros, who is fearless and willing to step up when it counts. So please join me in welcoming George Soros.
It is the first time that I feel that I need to stand up and do something really and become really engaged in the electoral process in this country.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. Welcome to Stranger Than Fiction News, ladies and gentlemen. Broadcasting live from the dark side of the planet, and we've got all sorts of news to cover. Seems like the video guy's on vacation. We're getting the breaking news that 1 million Americans are going to turn up this weekend to Washington, D.C., around the White House, and perhaps there'll be more than 1 million people showing up. Ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be an extravaganza. Now, did you know that just before this pandemic kicked off, ladies and gentlemen, that they put in place this fence that you're looking at here? It's rather remarkable. It's got the anti-personnel spikes, kind of like Game of Thrones. We need to put their heads on these spikes. Who's they, ladies and gentlemen? Those that are responsible for this pandemic. They've gassed you like bugs, like cockroaches. They're trying to kill you. It's right there on their Georgia Guidestones. It's why they've been poisoning the food, the air, the water. It's why they've been destroying our country. Have you seen the devolution since the Happy Days, since Leave It to Beaver, the Brady Bunch? Ladies and gentlemen, have you seen what they've done to our country?
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
We are up against the Matrix. We are up against forces of evil, and have no doubt about it. If you do not rise up against this tyranny, this will be you. They will capture you one by one and kill you and exterminate you one by one. They'll send their goon squads door to door. Have you had your vaccine? Please come with us. This is your future. And it could have been prevented had you risen up and pushed back against this tyranny. Now, these communists have beaten you to the boogaloo. They're showing up. They're organized. You're sitting on your couch just watching this unfold on television. The commies are kicking your ass, and chances are they're going to overthrow the government. Now, as it were, the Secret Service is planning an evac of the president to some golf course in New Jersey this weekend. They don't even want to be there for what happens next. But they can't run forever, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what are we talking about here? Because a lot of people are confused. Let's remind you of the situation. Oh, the video guy. Oh, for fuck's sakes, he's gone.
Thing that gives you high confidence that it originated in that Wuhan lab.
Martha, there's enormous evidence that that's where this began. We've said from the beginning that this was a virus that originated in Wuhan, China. We took a lot of grief for that from the outset, but I think the whole world can see now. Remember, China has a history of infecting the world, and they have a history of running substandard laboratories. These are not the first times that we've had a war.
Yeah, we're just not getting the cooperation that we need from the video guy here. The clips have disappeared. We'll be looking into that. In any case, this lab at the center of this outbreak is tied to Fauci. Fauci's fingerprints are all over this lab. They're calling it a live exercise. They're calling it an artificial event. They're calling it a plandemic, and that's exactly what this is. It's been planned since at least 2010. What is it with the video guy today? We must really be having a profound effect on the Matrix because they just don't want to let us continue on. And if it's not one thing, it's another. But you see this screenshot from the movie Avengers 2011? This is Captain America. Behind Captain America is a Corona beer bottle and a virus. They've been planning this since 2010. Probably before. And it didn't matter if it was Hillary or Trump in office. This was going to happen. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, it's right on the Georgia Guidestones. That's why. They're out to get you. They're out to kill you. And you may not like that version of the story, but that is what is going on. You can be in denial all you want. It doesn't change a thing. These death hours are getting closer. They're upping the dosage in the water. Have you smelt the chlorine lately? It's not just for your protection. It's not just to make your teeth white. They're trying to kill you. You know, there was a time not that long ago where autism wasn't even a thing in our country. Now everybody's got pretty much an autistic child. They're coming after the children. Even in the schools, they're out there trying to sexualize and murder these children. We've got so much news to cover. But the big breaking news right now, ladies and gentlemen, is that 1 million people are going to surround the White House this weekend. Mostly communists. But you have to wonder, you know, what are the patriots doing? They're just going to be watching this on TV. Yeah, send the army, send the military. Go get them. Go get them. Kill those fuckers. Ladies and gentlemen. And, you know, there's not going to be any worse optics than watching U.S. troops shoot U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. And this is probably why the Pentagon is like, no, not happening. They don't want to deploy U.S. troops to shoot U.S. citizens on American soil. And we've got at least 3 different generals right now speaking up against this president. And it's only the beginning. We talked about this yesterday. And they've tried to, you know, censor that information. And it was weird because on Facebook, they tagged it as graphic violence. You can tell what you're not supposed to talk about if they attempt to censor you. And yesterday they just shut down this broadcast, mid-broadcast. And, you know, they don't want people talking about this. They want the rollout of the full police state, you know. And it looks like, you know, Cobra Commander out there, quite literally. Especially with creepy Biden out there running around with his black face mask. But these are the optics that essentially the U.S. military would like to avoid, and with good reason. Because if you denigrate our service members to the level of police officers, then all of a sudden, you know, that's going to paint a very different picture. And it's already begun. There's videos out there, just like this middle one, where U.S. troops are just basically being insulted right there on the front lines on U.S. soil. So there's a lot of problem with the optics here. Of course, everybody wants this, these riots to end, and for the most part they have. But now they're going to organize into something else in the aftermath. And, Trump would like nothing better than to, basically exterminate, all the people that might show up. And, some of us may want that as well. If it's just Antifa out there, open fire, bitches. The less communists, the better, right? That's what most people are thinking. But essentially, that's not the way due process is supposed to work. And that's how we ended up in this situation in the first place. George Floyd didn't get due process. He got instant extermination. Now, of course, there's a lot of talk about, was he high? Was he a criminal? Was he a wife beater? That may be the case, it may not be the case, but that's still not a capital crime. They don't send people to death row for these kind of things. And if they do send them to death row, there's a trial in court. And so for all the people that are going to be out there, denigrating George Floyd, a dead man who can't defend himself, without due process, that's, it's un-American. And there's a reason why we have a constitution. There's a reason why we have a Bill of Rights. It is to protect you from tyranny. And when you start letting some of it go, you're letting it all go. And right now, they've taken away your right to free speech, the right to privacy, and many other rights, in fact, the right to peaceably assemble. You don't need their permission to speak. What you say cannot be a crime, and yet it is. We see people being arrested for what they say. We see people being arrested for peacefully protesting. We see people being gassed for protesting. Cruel and unusual punishment, to say the least. And this isn't what America is supposed to be about. And there's probably a lot of people cheering, martial law right now. This is what we need. When you start making excuses...
It is not enough for America's future.
Fucking Hillary. When you start making excuses for, unconstitutional behavior, you become part of the problem. And it doesn't matter if it sounds, appealing. Sure, roll out the military. We need law and order. We need justice, right? But they're never going to give you justice. What they want to give you is oppression and tyranny. And the law means what it says and says what it means. You have the right to free speech. You have the right to peaceably assemble. And you have the right to your religion. Everywhere and anywhere you go, that's your right. But you see them trying to push that out of society. And that's part of the problem. The Bible guarantees our freedom. It's right there in the Ten Commandments. And when society moves away from that, you go right back into bondage. Just like that pyramid on the back of the dollar bill. That represents New Babylon. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Romans 12:19. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got lots of news to cover. Check this out. Soros, he says he's going to bring down the United States by funding black hate groups, would put them into a mental trap, a psyop, a false flag, and make them blame white people. The black community is the easiest to manipulate, according to George Soros, with his interview with BILD, September 2014. Any case, lots of news to cover. So much to say. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, right now, there's 1 million people that are about to surround the White House. And probably not one of them is a conservative. No Captain America on the front lines in this revolution, just communists. Captain America out there is too busy watching television, too busy being on the internet. Now, did you see this, Captain America? 2011, coronavirus, corona beer, and virus. And it gets super strange, ladies and gentlemen. How many people actually researched the Project Dark Winter? The prelude to the anthrax attacks that were tied into 9/11. Guess who was one of the participants of Dark Winter? We covered this in a previous broadcast. Anybody? Anybody know? Mike Pence. That's right. You win the prize. Mike Pence received an anthrax letter. I know we've got that video somewhere, ladies and gentlemen. And turns out now he was leading the Corona task force, involved, like many of the other players. And, you know, the people that did Dark Winter did Event 201. Did you hear about Event 201? Did you hear about that?
We're here today not just to talk about the future of this company. We're here to talk about its destiny. The means of our salvation are already at hand. I give to you the T-virus.
The T-virus. T for Trump, bitches. Quite literally. But it would have been Hillary too. No matter who would have won, we would have gotten the same thing. And essentially what we have in our country is election despotism. It's a big word. Election despotism. What does that mean?
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
What it means is that nothing on television is authentic. Not the politicians, not the news. It's all the same group of people. It's like a bunch of Charlie Manson groupies, in fact. And it doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat, you know, as far as in the White House, because it's really the same group. And we discovered that undeniably in the 2004 elections when it was Bush versus Kerry. And they came on Meet the Press and they were like, yeah, we're cousins and we're from the same fraternity, Skull and Bones, 322. Ha ha ha. They killed Tim Russert for that shit. Just like they killed Breitbart, just like they killed Tom Clancy and Michael Hastings and the dude from Gray State. Look at you now, bitches. And so, regardless, we were able to see, in fact, just how elite the elite are. The same bloodlines, the same Ivy League schools, the same fraternities. It's that selective. It's not a free and fair election. It's this little group of people that are in charge. And that's despotism. That's exactly what despotism is. And that's exactly what, you know, started the revolution back in 1776. It's the video guy is fired. But it's the despotism that started the revolution. And I mean, they went all in over taxes. I mean, I'm sure they were getting euthanized by the British, but they went all in over taxes. No taxation without representation, bitch. Remember that? And now you get irradiated without representation. You get, you know, vaccinated without representation. You get fluoridated without representation. In fact, you're totally like excluded from the decision process. And not only that, it is impossible to opt out. And so not only is it despotism, it's full-blown tyranny out there. And that's why this system has to change. We've witnessed the devolution in our country over the last, 50 plus years. And literally we've gone from the happy days, from Leave It to Beaver, And, we went into disco, and then all of a sudden, here we are in this Luciferian homeland, Mark of the Beast style. And they want to chip everyone, and they want to plug everyone into the Matrix. Quite literally. Go ask Elon Musk. Go research the Neuralink, ladies and gentlemen. And you can't opt out. You can't opt out of what's coming next, the transhumanism. And that's not transsexual. That's like transitioning you into a cyborg. That's their plan. Literally jacking you into the Matrix. That's their plan. You won't be able to opt out. And of course, on the way there, on this yellow brick road, they're going to exterminate as many people as they can to get it down to the 500,000 or so, or is it 500 million or so that they want on the entire planet. They mean to exterminate pretty much everybody out there. And you might say to yourself, good riddance. There's too many communists out there. There's too many crackheads out there. All these people are victims of this system. They've been misinformed, miseducated, if you will. And unfortunately, the majority of these people don't know any better. And that's what, that's essentially the problem. The whole system is the problem. And so the whole system has got to go. It's tyrannical. It's despotism. And now they want to send in U.S. troops to kill U.S. citizens on U.S. soil and have that be all over the television. And we should celebrate Trump for it, for restoring quote-unquote law and order in the aftermath of an event that they engineered. Not only did they engineer this pandemic, and we have the proof of that, we got the receipt, Fauci's money. The NIAID was sending money for gain-of-function research to the Wuhan lab. The same Wuhan lab that released this virus. And then they let this virus boot up in Wuhan. They knew about this for months. They were having national security level briefings at the White House Thanksgiving last year. Senators were selling their stocks January, February, and they were still telling you to wash your hands with this airborne pneumonia. What kind of pneumonia isn't airborne, and they're telling you to wash your hands? You don't need a mask. Come to the rally. Why? Because they wanted everyone infected so that they could blackmail you with it. And, everybody will test positive if they want you to test positive. They'll bring you to their FEMA camps. This is all part of the plan. And not only that, but we know that this George Floyd situation was engineered as well. Now, we know that George Floyd was an actor. What kind of actor, you might ask? You don't want to know. But he appeared in a few films. So, was he a full-blown crisis actor in this engineered event? Or was he just a victim that they picked out that morning and said, yeah, well, look, we got to kill somebody. Might as well be that dude. And regardless, it became what it became because they wanted it to happen. They needed it to happen. Why? You're about to find out why. Because under the new martial law plan, they'll be coming door to door to implement the vaccine, which comes out certainly by the end of the year or early next year. And today they were so desperate, they're like, we got to do something. So what do? They engineer the numbers. They're like, 2.5 million people found a job again. And everybody's going apeshit. Look, Trump did it again. He saved the Dow. And it seems like the worse it got out there, the better the stocks did. Did you notice that for a while? I mean, like, they were announcing everything. 10 million jobs gone, 15% unemployment, and the stocks went up like 1,000 points. It's like, what is going on? But they've got you so distracted, so deceived with this stock market, with this ticker, that you think that that is the true health of the economy, the true health of society. And, by looking at what's going on out there, the Dow should always be at negative 666, because that's what it is. That's what's going on out there. It's Luciferians in control, engineering a Luciferian society while they exterminate people. And look, the television is 24/7 product placement for the dark side. One sin or another. Desperate Housewives, Breaking Bad, killing people, dissolving them in acid. They want to take down people's content for, incitement to violence or things of that nature. What about the movies? What about the music? That stuff will play endlessly on socialist media platforms like Fakebook and ScrewTube. But independent news that looks to investigate and uncover the true nature of what's going on, that gets banned for being, a violation of their community standards. We better get into the news, ladies and gentlemen. Want to give a big shout out to everyone out there in the audience. I got to say hi to Toasted Webs out there. Toasted, Toasty. Who the fuck is this? Do says, I make you sleepy. Do I put you to sleep? Ladies and gentlemen, you might want to think about that. Because I'll tell you what else puts you to sleep. The Bible. You want to know why? Because there's a demon inside you that doesn't mind you watching television till 2 in the morning. But as soon as you pick up the Bible, you've got that spirit of heaviness that comes upon you. Huh? I want to give a big shout out to Karen Sizemore, Trey, Jessica, Pat's Place, Daniel, Nighty Night Dew, Zeno, what are you doing? Spider Mood, One World, Arturo, Zion, and many others. Oh, there's Afisha. I was wondering where she was. And a few others. Paul, how you doing? Owen, Jody, Shafiq. Did we say Jessica? I think we said Jessica. Robin. Wings of Depression. Light 'em up. He says, James Jackson. What's going on out there? It is Night of the Living Dead out there. We're dealing with demons. Remember Ephesians 6:12. We're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're not wrestling against people. We're wrestling against spiritual wickedness from heavenly places. Literally the walking dead that are possessing people, in a sense. And it's this network, this legion of demons that we're up against. And we could spend all day on that. Ladies and gentlemen, check out the Bible on tape. We've left a link in the video description on the YouTube channel. And, you should know it by heart. You should know it better than your favorite song if you really want to understand what's going on out there. Cuomo wants to revoke the no bail, well, we should say the law that he signed in saying that people don't require bail anymore. He wants to repeal his own law. People are turning against de Blasio and Cuomo out there in New York. FBI's investigation into Trump and Russia now looks even worse, according to Bloomberg. Ladies and gentlemen, Minneapolis City Council members aim to dismantle the police department. And, we're seeing, a defund the police movement happening in every city right now. Defund this police state. They don't need MRAPs. They don't need camouflage. They think they're the army, but they're not. They want to treat you like they're an occupying force, even though we're not supposed to be an occupied territory. Ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is a real heart-moving, heart-wrenching video See some poor guy, old guy, just trying to get his last few breaths. And here comes the ghetto to save him. You know, at the end of the day, we're all human. And, you know, we deserve fresh air, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But we don't get that. How free do you feel right now? How well served do you feel by this government or any government in the past 20 years? Do you feel served and protected out there, or punished and enslaved? And, you know, really watching them beat down, you know, poor people in wheelchairs and the like, you know, screams tyranny. And I think, you know, people really need to get beyond the Republican, Democrat labels out there, because those people on television, they're not on your side. They don't give a fuck about you. Pardon my language. You know, it's one big club and you're not in it. And, you know, to sit there and root for these people on television, it's despicable. I don't want to hear anything about Trump or Biden. As far as everybody's concerned, they're all child molesters hanging out with Epstein. And cheering for one or the other makes you look like a buffoon, to be quite honest with you. Oh, I support Biden. Oh, I support Trump. Really? The fuck's wrong with you? You know, there's so many people out there that you know, woke up just to go right back to sleep with the next psyop. Oh, Trump's on my side. He was on NBC for 11 years. Now he's on my side. Oh, he's related to Hillary. Let Hillary go. Trump's on my side. He rolled out the 5G death towers on everybody's neighborhood. Trump's on my side. Really? Get the fuck out of here. You know, and it's been like this for years. But to see people go back to sleep and then troll you for it, like, oh no, Trump, really, forget the. Look, you might like what they're saying. That's the point of the con. Everybody likes the con man. Everybody likes the sales pitch, but they don't deliver. They didn't deliver on term limits. They didn't deliver on the wall. They didn't deliver on a whole bunch of things. They gave you like a small portion. And, you know, while they were giving you peanuts, they were hoarding it for themselves. The whole, you know, lot of them here. A single bee can be ignored, but when millions come together, even the bravest run in fear. The one thing the government fears is the day we stand together. That's why you got to forget about Republican and Democrat. Ladies and gentlemen, these people on TV, they're not your friends. It's like, you know, it's like when people fall in love with a character from a show like Friends or something. Who was your favorite friend? You know, or who was your favorite character from whatever movie? Avengers, Mission Impossible, you know. Those people aren't fucking real. They're actors. Just like the people, just like the politicians. They're reading a script, they're reading the teleprompter. They're not real. They're not real people. And the sooner you realize that, the better everybody will be. So quit coming on here saying Trump 2020. You might as well be saying the devil 2020, bitches. Because that's what's going on. It's a beast system. And if you really want to know, just check out 666 Fifth Avenue. Check out the 66th floor of Trump Tower and the like. You don't know Trump. You fuckers don't know Trump. If you knew Trump, you'd be like these generals at the Pentagon saying, fuck you. You know what I mean? Now, the good news here is that Trump will be evacuated to Bedminster, Jersey golf course. 1 million strong coming to the White House on D-Day, the 6th day of the 6 months at high noon. And it just happens to have 106 likes or whatever. 106 shares, 166 likes. Ha ha ha. You know it's going to be bad news. The commies are coming, bitches. What are you going to do? D.C. Mayor Bowers is kicking the Utah National Guard out of D.C. hotels tomorrow. More than 1,200 troops will be evicted so that organizers can show up unmolested. They don't want our troops getting a good night's sleep. And you know, when people are tired, angry, and confused, they pull the trigger, bitches. So what will happen this weekend? Probably nothing, but you could expect the worst. You know what I mean? Organizers say 1 million people are coming to protest D.C. this weekend. The mayor here wants to withdraw all extraordinary federal law enforcement and military presence from our city. Just make the White House a sitting duck for 1 million protesters coming to burn it like 1812. That's what we should expect here, ladies and gentlemen. Never forget about this Bonnie and Clyde duo. They took out 7 Death Towers, supposedly, out there in Canada, and pedophile Trudeau is holding them hostage. They need to be released and set free, ladies and gentlemen. Now here they are. Here are the protesters, the U.S. citizens. Let us just remind you of that. These are U.S. citizens that deserve due process, and maybe a little Weight Watchers with that one girl. But here they are torching the courthouse because there is no justice in America. These courthouses are set up to protect the guilty and prosecute the innocent. And we mean that relatively speaking. You know, you jaywalking or speeding is nothing compared to what these genocidal fuckers are doing with their death towers and the like. Now we've got them on tape here saying, don't kill them, but hit them hard, hurt them badly, punish them. What's this? Celebration atmosphere at Capitol Hill in Seattle. Looks like they're partying like it's they're partying like it's 1999. Anybody remember 1999 Y2K? Oh, those were the good days, man. The good old days. The 90s were excellent compared to today. And you know what? For thousands of years, they've been saying the same thing. Oh, remember the good old days? Because it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Believe it or not. Oh, check this out. Here they come with their rainbow flags. Check this out. They got their knee pads, their helmets. You see that? Remember when you used to do that as a kid? Now that can be a profession. See that? Wow. The bike crew showing up. What's this? Ah, yes. Trump has finally delivered the wall around the White House to protect him. And again, you know, they set up anti-personnel spikes just months before all of this went down, last August. And we showed you a little bit of that. Now, what's this? Soros at Davos. And that's pretty much where they cooked up this virus and these riots. Davos for devil. But basically, Soros is saying that the American economy was soaring all through the Trump presidency. And yet, if we could destabilize that economy, we would destroy Trump. So, you know, these people need to be brought in for questioning, obviously. They're saying that Trump is more isolated than ever. And, you know, there's all sorts of people. Whoever has worked with this guy basically calls him a creeper. And, you know, there's a difference between public image and the real thing. And I don't think anybody out there knows the real Donald Trump. You get to see the actor that shows up on television, and you've noticed how spooky it is when he reads a speech. You know, when he's given a speech, it's like all of a sudden he's like a different person. It's like the Manchurian Candidate or something. Not sure how many people really understand that. And look, you know, a lot of people that support Trump because they don't like Hillary and they don't like creepy Biden. That's not an excuse. That's not good enough to just hand over everything because you don't like the other guy. You don't give one dude a blank check because you don't like the other guy. You don't go into Burger King and give them a blank check because you don't like McDonald's, right? That's not how the real world works. Yeah, that's essentially what happens every election. You only get to choose between Burger King and McDonald's as if there were no other restaurants out there, as if there were no other choices out there. That's the election despotism. And what makes it worse is that these people, these franchises are owned by the same corrupt people. Now, it looks like in Australia, They were having a moment there. They were protesting against the Communist Chinese, and quite literally the Communist Chinese Party shows up, grabs the bullhorn, and picks a fight. And picks a fight with the protesters on their own soil. The Chinese have already invaded Australia, bitches. They own it all. What else we got here? Tonight, the NYPD hit a protester walking his bike and smacking them with batons. I'm sure it was pretty... You can check out all of this footage on our website, stfnreport.com, or our Twitter feed, Stranger Than Fiction News. And if you're watching this on Facebook, be sure to, check out the live shows on ScrewTube. Join the chat, join the community. Here's how child traffickers hunt our children to rape, torture, sell, and murder them and destroy the future of our nation with their brand of evil. Check out Contraland. Got a link of that. Every truther in 2020 is like, I fucking told you so, bitches. Right? But I told you so only gets you so far. You know what I mean? Liking and sharing will only get you so far. It'll bring people there, but then what do you do once you get there? John Kelly, former chief of staff, calls Donald Trump nasty and confused over attack on General Mattis and the like. So you've got the current Secretary of Defense, the former Secretary of Defense, and John Kelly saying that, this president is essentially out of his mind. They would know. And look, anybody that snatches Julian Assange, lets Hillary go, genocides the Kurds, and rolls out death towers in everybody's fucking neighborhood in one administration has got to be out of their mind. Not to mention no term limits, no nothing, on board with the plandemic and everything. And now they want to deploy troops and start shooting American citizens on U.S. soil. So if you think that sounds like a good idea, you're doing exactly what the Germans did back in the 1930s. When Hitler was like, oh yes, we must invade Czechoslovakia. We must invade Poland for our freedom, for our protection. We must kill for our safety. And if you're willing to trade, martial law for your security, you are definitely part of the problem. And it's not like you can't understand why they did it. You have to understand why they've never ever done that before and why it shouldn't be done, right? The military is not to be used to police our country. If the police can't do their job with MRAPs and everything they got, they've got other problems to deal with. But, the more they militarize, the more, extreme things will become. And, that's essentially the point. Now, the way they treated this guy, it was like some 75-year-old guy, and literally they push him over, a senior citizen, the elderly, and the dude's like immediately bleeding from the ears. It's pretty bad. And, he turns into a gusher right there, and they're all just like, trampling over him basically. So check out the predictive programming. The First Avenger, 2011. Captain America's right there, and you see Corona beer with virus in the background. And not only that, but we saw predictive programming with Kobe Bryant. Literally a helicopter crash in a cartoon episode titled The End of the World. And in that episode, they were rioting, and it was called End of the World. And it was, it was pretty spooky to see that. I think it was I don't know what the cartoon was, like Clifford Heights or something. But, there was a lot of predictive programming. And I think we're going to find more, like 9/11. And, people want to debate, were there real planes? Were there not real planes? It's besides the point. They let those planes in. They let them fly around for hours. They were running exercises, the day of. That made it impossible for the military to actually do their job. So it was, all designed and engineered. What else we got here? Now, yesterday, look, this was really bombshell. This really should have been like the big news story of today. And it was this, what do you want to call it? This fraud. They keep attacking hydroxychloroquine because, Trump endorsed it. And they went as far as, publishing a huge study in the Lancet based on data from a company called Surgisphere, a company that doesn't even exist. And, they were pumping these numbers out, to scientists who were using it as, proof that it didn't work. And the whole thing was a fraud, a whole scam. The whole thing was a scam. And you probably heard about this, a couple days ago, or maybe like a week ago, where they're like, new study says hydroxychloroquine. And there was another tainted one from the VA as well. They're so desperate, to sell you an expensive cure. Ladies and gentlemen, I know we're going to have a little fun with the music today. Bill Withers, Lean On Me, bitches. And, they were playing that today. And, it just brought tears, I think, to everybody's eyes, thinking about, where we came from, especially in the 90s, to where we are today. What they've done to the country, it's disgusting. And these people must be held accountable. Boogaloo July 4th, bring the guillotine. Why the pandemic? Let's go after this new world order. They tried to genocide you. You need to genocide them. And they don't want you to have the cure. They don't want you to have the medicine. They just want you to have, all of the misinformation. They're like, yeah, use some hand sanitizer and breathe that shit in. And in fact, it makes it worse because, this respiratory illness, basically activates with, things like hand sanitizer and death towers. They got you by the balls, bitches. And they're never going to let you go. But this, this story on Surgisphere and hydroxychloroquine, just shows how they're willing to basically fake science for their political viewpoints. See what I'm saying? So, it's bad. It's real bad out there. Check all this stuff out on our website, stfnreport.com. And that pretty much, brings us to yesterday's news. Want to give a big shout out to everybody out there. Yesterday they cut us off, and seems like we're still out there. So, big shout out to everybody in the audience, broadcasting live on the ScrewTube. Everything is fake. Nothing is real. You live in the Matrix. Look, you can only take that so far. We've talked about that before. Everything you need to know is right there in the DNA. Every life form is based on a programming language. We didn't just land here on this Goldilocks planet. We were put here. And for more on that, check out the documentary Unlocking the Mysteries of Life, as well as Genesis chapter 1. That's the beginning of the story, and everybody really needs to know their Bible by heart better than their favorite song, because it's not about Republicans versus Democrats out there. It's about Christians versus demons, essentially. And that's the war zone that we're in. So act accordingly, ladies and gentlemen. It's a holy war, and look, we're all called to participate and do our part. And right now it's really getting extreme. But remember, we're called to make the way straight. And you know what's coming next. It's the harvest. It's the full extermination of the dark side. And so if we're to make the way straight for the extermination of the dark side, then it becomes quite clear what we're here to do, ladies and gentlemen. We'll leave it there for this broadcast. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Until the next time, if you're listening to this,